Section 23 of Libraries of the World's Best Literature, Ancient and Modern, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Thomas Kuzmarski. Library of the World's Best Literature, Ancient and Modern, Volume 2, Section 23. Sindbad the Seaman and Sindbad the Landsman from the Arabian Nights. Portions of Nights 536 to 542 presenting the introduction and the first of the 7 voyages. Translation of Captain Sir Richard Burton. There lived in the city of Baghdad, during the reign of the commander of the faithful, Harun al-Rashid, a man named Sindbad the Hamal porter, one in poor case, who bore burdens on his head for hire. It happened to him one day of great heat that whilst he was carrying a heavy load he became exceeding weary and sweated profusely, the heat and the weight alike oppressing him. Presently, as he was passing the gate of a merchant's house, before which the ground was swept and watered, and where the air was temperate, he sighted a broad bench beside the door, so he set his load thereon, to take rest and smell the air. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 537th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Hamal set his load upon the bench to take rest and smell the air, there came out upon him from the court door a pleasant breeze and a delicious fragrance. He sat down on the edge of the bench, and at once heard from within the melodious sound of lutes and other stringed instruments, and mirth-exciting voices singing and reciting, together with the song of birds warbling and glorifying Almighty Allah in various tunes and tongues, turtles, mockingbirds, merles, nightingales, cushates, and stone curlews, whereat he marvelled in himself, and was moved to mighty joy and solace. Then he went up to the gate, and saw within a great flower garden, wherein were pages and black slaves, and such a train of servants and attendants and so forth, as is found only with kings and sultans. And his nostrils were greeted with the savoury odours of all manner meats, rich and delicate, and delicious and generous wines. So he raised his eyes heavenwards, and said, Glory to thee, O Lord, O Creator and Provider, who providest whomso thou wilt without count or stint. O mine Holy One, I cry thee pardon for all sins, and turn to thee repenting of all offences. O Lord, there is no gainsaying thee in thine ordinance and thy dominion, neither wilt thou be questioned of that thou dost, for thou indeed over all things art almighty. Extolled be thy perfection, whom thou wilt thou makest poor, and whom thou wilt thou makest rich, whom thou wilt thou exaltest, and whom thou wilt thou abasest, and there is no God but thou. How mighty is thy majesty, and how enduring thy dominion, and how excellent thy government. Verily, thou favourest whom thou wilt of thy servants, whereby the owner of this place abideth in all joyance of life, and delighteth himself with pleasant scents, and delicious meats, and exquisite wines of all kinds. For indeed thou appointest unto thy creatures that which thou wilt, and which thou hast ordained unto them. Wherefore are some weary, and others are at rest, and some enjoy fair fortune and affluence, whilst others suffer the extreme of travail and misery, even as I do. And he fell to reciting. How many by my labours that evermore endure all goods of life enjoy, and in cooly shade recline. Each morn that dawns I wake in travail and in woe, and strange is my condition, and my burden gars me pine. Many others are in luck, and from miseries are free, and fortune never loads them with loads the like o' mine. They live their happy days in all solace and delight, eat, drink, and dwell in honour mid the noble and the dane. All living things were made of a little drop of sperm. Thine origin is mine, and my provenance is thine. Yet the difference and distance twixt the twain of us are far as the difference of savour twixt vinegar and wine. But at thee, O God all-wise, I venture not to rail, whose ordinance is just, and whose justice cannot fail. When Sindbad the porter had made an end of reciting his verses, he bore up his burden, and was about to fare on, when there came forth to him from the gate a little foot-page, fair of face, and shapely of shape, and dainty of dress, who caught him by the hand, saying, Come in and speak with my lord, for he calleth for thee. The porter would have excused himself to the page, but the lad would take no refusal. So he left his load with the doorkeepers in the vestibule, and followed the boy into the house, which he found to be a goodly mansion, radiant and full of majesty, till he brought him to a grand sitting room, wherein he saw a company of nobles and great lords seated at tables garnished with all manner of flowers and sweet-scented herbs, besides great plenty of dainty viands and fruits dried and fresh, and confections and wines of the choicest vintages. There also were instruments of music and mirth, and lovely slave girls playing and singing. All the company was ranged according to rank, and in the highest place sat a man of worshipful and noble aspect, whose beard sides hoariness had stricken. And he was stately of stature, and fair of favour, agreeable of aspect, and full of gravity and dignity and majesty. So Sindbad the porter was confounded at that which he beheld, and said in himself, By Allah, this must be either a piece of paradise or some king's palace. Then he saluted the company with much respect, praying for their prosperity, and kissing ground before them, stood with his head bowed down in humble attitude. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 538th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sindbad the porter, after kissing ground between their hands, stood with his head bowed down in humble attitude. The master of the house bade him draw near, and he seated and bespoke him kindly, bidding him welcome. Then he set before him various kinds of viands, rich and delicious, and the porter, after saying his Bismillah, fell to and ate his fill, after which he exclaimed, Praise be Allah, whatso be our case, and washing his hands, returned thanks to the company for his entertainment. Quoth the host, Thou art welcome, and thy day is a blessed, but what are thy name and calling? Quoth the other, O my lord, my name is Sindbad the Hamal, and I carry folks' goods on my head for hire. The housemaster smiled and rejoiced. Know, O porter, that thy name is even as mine, for I am Sindbad the Seaman. And now, O porter, I would have thee let me hear the couplets thou recitest at the gate anon. The porter was abashed, and replied, Allah upon thee, excuse me for toil and travail, and lack of luck. When the hand is empty, teach a man ill manners and boorish ways. Said the host, Be not ashamed, thou art become my brother, but repeat to me the verses, for they pleased me whenas I heard thee recite them at the gate. Hereupon the porter repeated the couplets, and they delighted the merchant, who said to him, Know, O Hamal, that my story is a wonderful one, and thou shalt hear all that befall me, and all I underwent ere I rose to this state of prosperity, and became the lord of this place, wherein thou seest me. For I came not to this high estate, save after travail sore and perils galore, and how much toil and trouble have I not suffered in days of yore? I have made 7 voyages, by each of which hangeth a marvellous tale, such as confoundeth the reason, and all this came to pass by doom of fortune and fate, for from what destiny doth write, there is neither refuge nor flight. Know then, good my lords, continued he, that I am about to relate the first voyage of Sindbad, hight the Seaman. My father was a merchant, one of the notables of my native place, a moneyed man and ample of means, who died whilst I was yet a child, leaving me much wealth in money and lands and farmhouses. When I grew up, I laid hands on the whole, and ate of the best, and drank freely, and wore rich clothes, and lived lavishly, companioning and consorting with youths of my own age, and considering that this course of life would continue for ever, and ken no change. Thus did I for a long time, but at last I awoke from my heedlessness, and returning to my senses, I found my wealth had become unwealth, and my condition ill condition, and all I once had left my hand. And recovering my reason, I was stricken with dismay and confusion, and bethought me of a saying of our Lord Solomon, son of David, upon whom be peace, which I had heard aforetime from my father. 3 things are better than other 3. The day of death is better than the day of birth. A live dog is better than a dead lion, and the grave is better than want. Then I got together my remains of estates and property, and sold all, even my clothes, for 3,000 dirhams, with which I resolved to travel to foreign parts, remembering the saying of the poet, "By means of toil man shall scale the height. Who to fame aspires mustn't sleep o' night. Who seeketh peril in the deep must dive, winning weal and wealth by his main and might. And who seeketh fame without toil and strife, th' impossible seeketh and wasteth life." So, taking heart, I bought me goods, merchandise, and all needed for a voyage, and impatient to be at sea, I embarked, with a company of merchants, on board a ship bound for Bassorah. There we again embarked, and sailed many days and nights, and we passed from isle to isle, and sea to sea, and shore to shore, buying and selling and bartering everywhere the ship touched, and continued our course till we came to an island as it were a garth of the garden of paradise. Here the captain cast anchor, and making fast to the shore, put out the landing planks. So all on board landed, and made furnaces, and lighting fires therein, busy themselves in various ways, some cooking, and some washing, whilst others walked about the island for solace. And the crew fell to eating and drinking and playing and sporting. I was one of the walkers, but as we were thus engaged, behold, the master, who was standing on the gunwale, cried out to us at the top of his voice, saying, "Ho there, passengers, run for your lives, and hasten back to the ship, and leave your gear, and save yourselves from destruction. Allah preserve you. For this island whereon ye stand is no true island, but a great fish, stationary a middlemost of the sea, whereon the sand hath settled, and trees have sprung up of old time, so that it is become like unto an island. But when ye lighted fires on it, it felt the heat and moved, and in a moment it will sink with you into the sea, and ye will all be drowned. So leave your gear, and seek your safety ere ye die." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 539th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the shipmaster cried to the passengers, 'Leave your gear, and seek safety ere ye die,' all who heard him left gear and goods, clothes washed and unwashed, fire pots and brass cooking pots, and fled back to the ship for their lives, and some reached it, while others, among whom was I, did not. For suddenly the island shook, and sank into the abysses of the deep, with all that were thereon, and the dashing sea surged over it with clashing waves. I sank with the others down into the deep, but Almighty Allah preserved me from drowning, and threw in my way a great wooden tub of those that had served the ship's company for tubbing. I gripped it for the sweetness of life, and bestriding it like one riding, paddled with my feet like oars, whilst the waves tossed me as in sport right and left. Meanwhile the captain made sail and departed with those who had reached the ship, regardless of the drowning and the drowned. And I ceased not following the vessel with my eyes, till she was hid from sight, and I made sure of death. Darkness closed in upon me whilst in this plight, and the winds and waves bore me on all that night and the next day, till the tub brought to with me under the lee of a lofty island, with trees overhanging the tide. I caught hold of a branch, and by its aid clambered up onto the land, after coming nigh upon death. But when I reached the shore, I found my legs cramped and numbed, and my feet bore traces of the nibbling of fish upon their soles. Withal, I had felt nothing for excess of anguish and fatigue. I threw myself down on the island ground like a dead man, and drowned in desolation swooned away, nor did I return to my senses till next morning. But I found my feet swollen, so made shift to move by shuffling on my breech and crawling on my knees, for in that island were found store of fruit and springs of sweet water. I ate of the fruits, which strengthened me. And thus I abode days and nights, till my life seemed to return, and my spirits began to revive, and I was better able to move about. So, after due consideration, I fell to exploring the island, and diverting myself with gazing upon all things that Allah Almighty had created there, and rested under the trees, from which I cut me a staff to lean upon. One day, as I walked along the marge, I caught sight of some object in the distance, and thought it a wild beast, or one of the monster creatures of the sea. But as I drew near it, looking hard for the while, I saw that it was a noble mare tethered on the beach. Presently I went up to her, but she cried out against me with a great cry, so that I trembled for fear and turned to go away. When there came forth a man from under the earth, and followed me, crying out and saying, Who and whence art thou, and what caused thee to come hither? O my lord, answered I am in very sooth a waif, a stranger, and was left to drown with sundry others by the ship we voyaged in. But Allah graciously sent me a wooden tub, so I saved myself thereon, and floated with me till the waves cast me up on this island. When he heard this, he took my hand, and saying, Come with me, carried me into a great sardab, or underground chamber, which was spacious as a saloon. He made me sit down at its upper end. Then he brought me somewhat of food, and being an hungered, I ate till I was satisfied and refreshed. And when he had put me at mine ease, he questioned me of myself, and I told him all that had befallen me from first to last. And as he wondered at my adventure, I said, By Allah, O Lord, excuse me, I have told thee the truth of my case, and the accident which betided me. And now I desire that thou tell me who thou art, and why thou abidest here under the earth, and why thou hast tethered yonder mare on the brink of the sea. Answered he, Know that I am one of the several who are stationed in different parts of this island, and we are of the grooms of King Mihrján, and under our hand are all his horses. And Inshallah I will bear thee to King Mihrján. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 540th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the Sais said to Sindbad the Seaman, I will bear thee to King Mihrján, and show thee our country. And know that hast thou not happened on us, thou hast perished miserably, and known had known of thee, but I will be the means of the saying of thy life, and thy return to thine own land. I called down blessings on him, and thanked him for his kindness and courtesy. After this we sat a while, till the rest of the grooms came up, each leading a mare, and seeing me with their fellow syce, questioned me of my case, and I repeated my story to them. Thereupon they drew near me, and spreading the table, ate and invited me to eat. So I ate with them, after which they took horse, and mounting me on one of the mares, set out with me, and fared on without ceasing till we came to the capital city of King Mihrján, and going into him, acquainted him with my story. Then he sent for me, and when they set me before him, and salams had been exchanged, he gave me a cordial welcome, and wishing me long life, bade me tell him my tale. So I related to him all that I had seen, and all that had befallen me from first to last. Whereas he marvelled, and said to me, By Allah, O my son, thou hast indeed been miraculously preserved. Were not the term of thy life a long one, thou hast not escaped from these straits, but praised be Allah for safety. Then he spoke cheerily to me, and entreated me with kindness and consideration. Moreover, he made me his agent for the port and registrar of all ships that entered the harbour. I attended him regularly to receive his commandments, and he favoured me and did me all manner of kindness, and invested me with costly and splendid robes. Indeed, I was high in credit with him, as an intercessor for the folk and an intermediary between them and him when they wanted aught of him. I abode thus a great while, and as often as I passed through the city to the port, I questioned the merchants and travellers and sailors of the city of Baghdad, so happily I might hear of an occasion to return to my native land, but could find none who knew it, or knew any who resorted thither. At this I was chagrined, for I was weary of long strangerhood, and my disappointment endured for a time, till one day, going in to King Mihrján, I found with him a company of Indians. I saluted them, and they returned my salam, and politely welcomed me, and asked me of my country. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 541st night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Sindbad the Seaman said, When they asked me of my country, I questioned them of theirs, and they told me that they were of various castes, some being called Shakiriyah, who are the noblest of their castes, and neither oppress nor offer violence to any, and other Brahmins, a folk who abstain from wine, but live in delight and solace and merriment, and own camels and horses and cattle. Moreover, they told me that the people of India are divided into 72 castes, and I marvelled at this with exceeding marvel. Amongst other things that I saw in King Mihrján's dominions was an island called Kasil, wherein all night is heard the beating of drums and tabrets. But we were told by the neighbouring islanders and by travellers that the inhabitants are people of diligence and judgment. In this sea I saw also a fish 200 cubits long, and the fishermen fear it, so they strike together a piece of wood and put it to flight. I also saw another fish with a head like that of an owl, besides many other wonders and rarities, which it would be tedious to recount. I occupied myself thus in visiting the islands, till one day, as I stood in the port with a staff in my hand, according to my custom, behold, a great ship, wherein were many merchants, came sailing for the harbour. When it reached the small inner port, where ships anchor under the city, the master furled his sails, and making fast to the shore, put out the landing planks, whereupon the crew fell to breaking bulk and landing cargo, whilst I stood by, taking written note of them. They were long in bringing the goods ashore. So I asked the master, Is there aught left in thy ship? And he answered, O my lord, there are divers bales of merchandise in the hold, whose owner was drowned from amongst us at one of the islands on our course. So his goods remained in our charge by way of trust, and we propose to sell them and note their price, that we may convey it to his people in the city of Baghdad, the home of peace. What was the merchant's name? Quoth I, and quoth he, Sindbad the Seaman. Whereupon I straightly considered him, and knowing him, cried out to him with a great cry, saying, O captain, I am that Sindbad the Seaman, who travelled with other merchants. And when the fish heaved, and thou callest to us, some saved themselves, and others sank, I being one of them. But Allah Almighty threw in my way a great tub of wood, of those the crew had used to wash withal, and the winds and waves carried me to this island, where by Allah's grace I fell in with King Mihrján's grooms, and they brought me hither to the king their master. When I told him my story, he entreated me with favour and made me his harbour master, and I have prospered in his service and found acceptance with him. These bales, therefore, are mine, the goods which God hath given me. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 542nd night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Sindbad the Seaman said to the captain, These bales are mine, the goods which Allah hath given me, the others cried, There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Verily, there is neither conscience nor good faith left among men. Said I, O race, what mean these words, seeing that I have told thee my case? And he answered, Because thou heardest me say that I had with me goods whose owner was drowned, thou thinkest to take them without right. But this is forbidden by law to thee, for we saw him drown before our eyes, together with many other passengers, nor was one of them saved. So how canst thou pretend that thou art the owner of the goods? O captain, said I, listen to my story, and give heed to my words, and my truth will be manifest to thee. For lying and leasing are the letter marks of hypocrites. Then I recounted to him all that had befallen me since I sailed from Baghdad with him to the time when we came to the fish island, where we were nearly drowned. I reminded him of certain matters which had passed between us, whereupon both he and the merchants were certified of the truth of my story, and recognized me, and gave me joy of my deliverance, saying, By Allah, we thought not that thou hadst escaped drowning, but the Lord hath granted thee new life. Then they delivered my bales to me, and I found my name written thereon, nor was aught thereof lacking. So I opened them, and making up a present for King Mihrján of the finest and costliest of the contents, caused the sailors to carry it up to the palace, where I went in to the king, and laid my present at his feet, acquainting him with what had happened, especially concerning the ship and my goods, whereat he wondered with exceeding wonder, and the truth of all that I had told him was made manifest to him. His affection for me redoubled after that, and he showed me exceeding honour, and bestowed me with a great present in return for mine. Then I sold my bales, and what other matters I owned, making a great profit on them, and bought me other goods and gear of the growth and fashion of the island city. When the merchants were about to start on their homeward voyage, I embarked on board the ship all that I possessed, and going to the king, thanked him for all his favours and friendship, and craved his leave to return to my own land and friends. He farewelled me, and bestowed upon me great store of the country stuffs and produce, and I took leave of him and embarked. Then we set sail, and fared on nights and days, by the permission of Allah Almighty, and fortune served us, and fate favoured us, so that we arrived in safety at Bassorah city, where I landed rejoiced at my safe return to my natal soil. After a short stay, I set out for Baghdad, the house of peace with store of goods and commodities of great price. Reaching the city in due time, I went straight to my own quarter and entered my house, where all my friends and kinsfolk came to greet me. Then I bought me eunuchs and concubines, servants and negro slaves, till I had a large establishment, and I bought me houses and lands and gardens, till I was richer and in better case than before, and returned to enjoy the society of my friends and familiars more assiduously than ever, forgetting all I had suffered of fatigue and hardship and strangerhood and every peril of travel. And I applied myself to all manner joys and solaces and delights, eating the daintiest viands and drinking the deliciousest wines, and my wealth allowed this state of things to endure. This, then, is the story of my first voyage, and tomorrow, inshallah, I will tell you the tale of the second of my 7 voyages. Saith he who telleth the tale, Then Sindbad the Seaman made Sindbad the Landsman sup with him, and bade give him 100 gold pieces, saying, Thou hast cheered us with thy company this day. The porter thanked him, and taking the gift went his way, pondering that which he had heard, and marveling mightily at what things betide mankind. End of section 23. Recording by John Thomas Kuzkasmarski. www.validateyourlife.com